topic of today's lecture is spinal cord. The spinal cord is elongated and cylindrical part of central nervous system, and it is slightly flattened anteroposteriorly. Now this spinal cord, it occupies upper two-third part of the vertebral column, and this spinal cord receives sensory inputs and integrates and associates the information and produces reflex response. Now, the length of the spinal cord is around 45 centimeters in males and 42 centimeters in females. The weight is 30 grams, and this spinal cord extends from the medulla, lower border of the medulla oblongata, to the at the level of this lower border of medulla oblongata. It lies at the level of upper border of the atlas. So it extends from the upper border of the atlas to the lower border of first lumbar vertebra. Clear? So this spinal cord is a continuation of medulla oblongata at the level of upper border of atlas to the lower border of L1 vertebra, or sometimes it is intervertebral disc between L1 and L2. Now this lower end is a tapering end, and this tapering end of the spinal cord is called as conus medullaris. Now what are the positional changes of the spinal cord? Up to third month of intrauterine life, the length of the spinal cord and vertebral column are same. But thereafter, as the age advances, this vertebral column grows faster than the spinal cord. At birth, the spinal cord ends at the level of L3 vertebra, lower border of L3 vertebra, and then in adults it lies at the level of lower border of L1 vertebra or intervertebral disc between L1 or L2. So in intrauterine life, up to the third month, the length of the spinal cord and the length of the vertebral canal is same, but as the age advances, the vertebral canal grows faster, and therefore the spinal cord ends at the level of lower border of L1. Now what are the coverings of the spinal cord? Now spinal cord is covered by three meninges. That is, the outermost is the dura mater, then deep to dura mater there is arachnoid mater, and then the innermost is the pia mater. Now in case of spinal cord, this dura mater consists of meningeal layer of the dura mater. So the spinal cord is covered by three meninges, that is the dura mater, arachnoid mater and the pia mater. Now the outermost is the dura mater. This is the dura mater, and this is only in case of spinal cord, this is the meningeal layer of dura mater, and this dura mater extends from the foramen magnum to the lower border of S2. So this dura mater extends from foramen magnum up to the lower border of second sacral vertebra. Now the space between the dura mater and vertebral canal, that is outside the dura mater, is called as epidural space, and it contains loose areolar tissue, semi-liquid fat and internal vertebral venous plexus. So outside the dura mater is epidural space, which contains loose areolar tissue, semi-liquid fat and internal vertebral venous plexus. The space between the dura and arachnoid matter. This is the red one is the arachnoid matter. So space between the dura and arachnoid matter is called as subdural space. So this is the subdural space and it contains capillary layer of fluid. So outer space is the epidural space and the space between the dura mater and arachnoid mater is called as the subdural space, which contains capillary layer of fluid. Now there is little bit difference between the cranial dura mater and spinal dura mater. So in cranial dura mater there are two layers of the dura mater, that is the meningeal layer and endostal layer. While in case of spinal cord, there is only one layer of dura mater, that is the meningeal layer of dura mater. In case of cranium, the dura mater shows folds, while in case of spinal cord, there are no such dural folds. In cranium, you can see the dural venous sinuses, and such dural venous sinuses are absent in spinal dura mater. And epidural space, as we have seen earlier, epidural space is present in the spinal dura while it is absent in case of cranium. So these are the differences between the cranial dura and spinal dura. Now we have seen the dura mater, which is the outermost covering. Then deep to the dura mater there is arachnoid matter. So this is the arachnoid matter. It is thin, delicate, transparent, avascular membrane. It invests the spinal cord loosely. And this arachnoid matter, it extends up to the lower border of the second sacral vertebra. So at the same level as the dura mater. So dura mater and arachnoid matter, it extends, it is attached to the lower border of second sacral vertebra. And the space between the arachnoid mater and pia mater, this is the pia mater, the innermost is the pia mater. The space between the arachnoid mater and the pia mater is called as subarachnoid space. So this is the subarachnoid space and it is filled with CSF. Okay, so the space between the arachnoid matter and pia mater is called as subarachnoid space and it is filled with CSF. And the innermost covering is the pia mater. So this is the pia mater. It is thin vascular membrane and it closely invests the spinal cord. So it is adherent to the spinal cord. Now this pia mater, it is below the spinal cord. Now this is the lower end of the spinal cord. So that is which is called as conus medullaris. So below conus medullaris, this pia mater, it continues as a thin thread-like prolongation and this thread-like prolongation is called as filum terminale. So it is called as filum terminale. And this final terminal, it extends up to the first coccygeal vertebra. So it is attached to the first coccygeal vertebra. This subarachnoid space, now if we have seen the subarachnoid space is present between the arachnoid matter and the pia mater. Now this subarachnoid space, it becomes continuous with the above it becomes continuous with the subarachnoid space around the brain and around the filum terminal. This is the filum terminal. So around the filum terminal there is a roomy space and this roomy space is called as lumbar cistern. So this is the filum terminal and around the filum terminal there is a space which is called as lumbar cistern. And the lumbar puncture is usually done between the L3 and L4 level. Now, which are the processes of the pia mater? There are three types of processes. One is the phylum terminale, then the linea splendens, and then ligamentum denticulatum. Now, phylum terminale, as we have seen, the phylum terminale, it is the delicate white thread-like structure. So, it is a continuation of pia mater below conus medullaris. So, it is very delicate white thread-like structure which extends from the conus medullaris, and then below it is attached to the first coccygeal vertebra. The length of the phylum terminale is around 20 centimeters, and it is divided into two parts, the phylum terminale internum and phylum terminale externum. Now we have seen this phylum terminale, it is attached, it extends from the conus medullaris to the first coccygeal vertebra, and the dura and arachnoid mater, they are attached to the second sacral vertebra. So this phylum terminale internum, it is 15 centimeter long and it is present within the dural sac. So within the dural sac, the part of the phylum terminale is called as phylum terminale internum, and outside the dural sac, which is around 5 centimeter long, is called as phylum terminale externum. Now the central canal extends up to the upper part of the phylum terminale, only up to 5 millimeter of the upper part of the phylum terminale. So this is the phylum terminale. Then the second process is the linea splendens. Now linea splendens means this is a septum-like projection of pia mater in the median fissure, in the anterior median fissure. This is the anterior median fissure, and in the anterior median fissure, the pia mater sends a septum-like projection. So here this pia mater becomes thickened and appears as glistening structure. So you can see a shiny thickened structure in the anterior median fissure, that is the linea splendens. And the third process is the ligamentum denticulatum. Now on either side of the spinal cord, this is the spinal cord, so on either side of the spinal cord, you can see a ribbon-like band which extends laterally. This ribbon-like band which extends laterally between the anterior and posterior roots of the spinal nerves. And this ribbon-like band, if you see the lateral margin of this band, it shows the teeth-like structure. Can you see this teeth-like structure? So these teeth-like structures are called as ligamentum denticulatum. So this ribbon-like band having teeth-like structure is called as ligamentum denticulatum. Now there are around 21 teeth of this ligamentum denticulatum, and the function of this ligamentum denticulatum is to hold the spinal cord in central position. Now the first pair of teeth is present of ligamentum denticulatum is present at the level of foramen magnum, and the last teeth is present between T12 and L1 spinal nerves. Okay, so there are 21 pairs of teeth which are attached to the ligamentum denticulatum. So phylum terminale, linea splendens, and ligamentum denticulatum are the processes of pia mater. Now, if you see the external features of the spinal cord, you can see the fissures and sulci. Then you can see the attachment of the spinal nerves. Then there are enlargements, and lastly the cauda equina. Now, this is the cross section of the spinal cord, and if you see the externally, it shows anteriorly there is a deep longitudinal groove. So this is a deep longitudinal groove and it is called as anterior median fissure. So this is the anterior median fissure. It extends from the entire length of the spinal cord. And this anterior median fissure, it lodges anterior spinal artery and reticulum of pia mater. So this is the anterior median fissure which is present on the anterior aspect. It is a deep longitudinal groove and it contains anterior spinal artery and a reticulum of pia mater. Posteriorly, if you see the posterior aspect, there is a shallow groove and this is called as the posterior median sulcus. Now this posterior median sulcus, it extends from the entire length of the spinal cord. Now each half of the spinal cord. So this spinal cord is divided. We have seen there is anterior median fissure and posterior median sulcus, and these fissures and sulcus they divide the spinal cord into two halves, equal halves. Okay. Now each half of the spinal cord is divided into three parts: the anterior part, the lateral part and the posterior part. Now here there is again a very faint groove that is called as anterolateral sulcus, where the ventral root of the spinal nerve is attached. So this is the ventral root of the spinal nerve and it is attached to the anterolateral sulcus. Similarly, on the posterior aspect, there is posterolateral sulcus and it receives the entry of the dorsal root of the spinal nerve. Okay, so there is anterior median fissure, there is posterior median sulcus, anterolateral sulcus, and posterolateral sulcus. So this fissure and this sulci, they divide each half into three parts: the anterior area, then this between the anterior median fissure and anterolateral sulcus, this is anterior area. Between anterolateral sulcus and posterolateral sulcus, this is the lateral area. And between posterolateral sulcus and posterior median fissure, this is the posterior area. Now, to the spinal cord, there are spinal nerves are attached. Okay, now there are around 31 pairs of spinal nerves and there are around 33 vertebrae. Okay, so 31 pairs of spinal nerves are attached to the spinal cord and each spinal nerve passes through the corresponding intervertebral foramen. So there are 8 cervical, 12 thoracic, 5 lumbar, 5 sacral and 1 coccygeal nerve. Now each spinal nerve, if you see each spinal nerve, it has two roots. This is the ventral root and this is the dorsal root. The ventral root contains motor fibers and the dorsal root conveys the sensory fibers. Now both these two roots, they enter through the corresponding intervertebral foramen to form a spinal nerve. Now the first cervical, if you see the first cervical nerve and the first coccygeal nerve, these two nerves, they don't have dorsal root. The first 7 cervical nerves pass in a notch above the pedicle of corresponding vertebrae. Then 8 cervical nerve, it passes above T1, and caudal to that, the remaining nerves, they pass below the pedicle of the corresponding vertebrae. So this is how the spinal nerves are arranged. Now what is spinal segment? Now spinal segment of the spinal cord is the portion of the spinal cord giving attachment to a pair of spinal nerves, that is called as the spinal segment. So we have seen that the spine up to 3rd month, the length of the spinal cord is same as that of the vertebral column. But later on, the vertebral column grows faster and the spinal cord ends at the level of lower border of L1. And as we have seen, that each spinal nerve passes through the corresponding uh, intervertebral foramen. So each spinal nerve passes through the intervertebral foramen of corresponding vertebrae. And spinal cord ends only at the level of L1. So the caudal nerves pass below the conus medullaris, and there is a bunch of spinal nerves below conus medullaris. This bunch is called as cauda equina. Now if you see the relationship between the spinal segments and the vertebral level, this is a rough calculation showing the vertebral level and the spinal level. So at the level of 3rd cervical vertebra, you can see the 3rd cervical spinal segment. But as you go down, there is a difference between the spinal segments and the vertebral level. So cauda equina, we have seen, it is a bunch of spinal nerves below conus medullaris, and this bunch is called as cauda equina. The meaning of cauda means cauda equina is the horse tail. So it appears like horse tail and therefore it is called as the cauda equina. Now in the spinal cord there are 2 enlargements. The spinal cord shows 2 enlargements, that is the cervical enlargement which extends from C4 to T2, and it contains motor fibers which supply the upper limb. And there is another enlargement, that is the lumbosacral enlargement, and it extends from L2 to S3 and it supplies the muscles of trunk and lower limb. Now internal features of the spinal cord. Now this is the cross section of the spinal cord, and internally the spinal cord shows, centrally it shows a canal, and this is called as the central canal. Now surrounding the central canal there is grey matter, and outside the grey matter this is the white matter. Now this grey matter, it is H-shaped. If you see the shape of the grey matter, it is H-shaped and it extends throughout the length of the spinal cord. So grey matter is H-shaped and it extends from the entire length of the spinal cord. This grey matter consists of nerve cells, neuroglia and blood vessels. Now this grey matter shows anterior grey column. So anteriorly, this is the anterior aspect. So anteriorly it shows anterior grey column, also called as ventral horn. Then it shows posterior grey column. It is also called as the dorsal horn. And in thoracic and upper two lumbar segment, it shows a third column, that is the lateral horn, which is situated here. So this lateral horn is present only in the thoracic and upper two lumbar segments. So this grey matter shows anterior grey column or ventral horn, posterior grey column or posterior horn, and the lateral horn, which is present in the thoracic and upper two lumbar segments. Now, the grey matter of both sides, both halves, are connected to each other by grey commissure. So this is the grey commissure which surrounds the central canal. Now, this grey matter, it shows variation at different levels. So at the cervical, thoracic, lumbar and sacral segments, the shape and size of the grey matter changes. Now the cervical, if you see the cervical spinal cord this is the cross section of the cervical spinal segment. This cross section at the cervical level, it is large and transversely oval. And if you see the grey matter, the posterior horn is long and slender, while the anterior horn is broad and massive anteriorly. Okay, so posterior horn is long and slender and anterior horn is broad and massive. At the thoracic level, the cross section is small and circular. The posterior horn is slender, while the anterior horn is also slender, and at the thoracic level we have seen it shows lateral horn. Then at the lumbar level, the cross section is large and circular. The posterior horn is bulbous and short, while the anterior horn is also bulbous, but as compared to the posterior horn, it is larger. So it is bulbous and short and it is larger than the posterior horn. And at the sacral segment, the cross section is small and circular or quadrilateral. The posterior horn is massive and ovoid, and the anterior horn, it is also massive and ovoid, but it is larger as compared to the posterior horn. So these are the differences at different levels, at cervical level, thoracic level, lumbar and the sacral levels. Now the grey matter of the spinal cord, it is, as we have seen, it is H shaped, and this grey matter, it consists of the neurons. So the anterior grey column consists of the motor neurons and interneurons. So this anterior gray column, it shows the motor neurons, and these are usually the lower motor neurons, and there it also consists of interneurons, while the posterior gray column consists of interneurons and tract cells. Now in the gray matter, these neurons are arranged in groups. Now this is the anterior gray column, this is the posterior gray column. Now in the anterior gray column, there are three groups of neurons. This is the medial group, which is shown by red color. So this is the medial group. Then the green color shows the lateral group, and the blue color shows the central group. Now medial group, it supplies the skeletal muscles of the trunk, and in the thoracic segment it occupies the whole anterior gray column. So this medial group supplies the trunk muscles, and in the thoracic segment it occupies the entire anterior gray column. This medial group is divided into two nuclei. This is the ventromedial nucleus, and this is the dorsomedial nucleus. So there are two nuclei, ventromedial nucleus and dorsomedial nucleus. Then the lateral group, which is shown in green color, this lateral group, it supplies the limb muscles, that is the muscles of the upper limb and the muscles of the lower limb. And this lateral group, it is present in cervical and lumbosacral enlargement. Now this lateral group is divided into three nuclei. This is the ventrolateral nucleus. This ventrolateral nucleus supplies the muscles of the arm or thigh. Then this is the dorsolateral nucleus. It supplies the muscles of the forearm and leg. And the retrodorsolateral nucleus, it supplies the intrinsic muscles of the hand and foot. So there are three lateral group nuclei. The ventrolateral nucleus, which supplies the muscles of the arm or thigh. Dorsolateral nucleus, which supplies the muscles of the forearm or leg. And the retrodorsolateral nucleus, which supplies the muscles of the intrinsic muscles of the hand and foot. Then the central group, it consists of the accessory nucleus and phrenic nucleus. So this is the accessory nucleus and the phrenic nucleus. So these are the nuclei in the anterior gray column. Now in the posterior gray column, the nuclei are arranged from apex to base. The outermost is the posteromarginal nucleus. So this is the posteromarginal nucleus. Then deep to it there is substantia gelatinosa. Then this is the nucleus proprius. Then there is dorsal nucleus or nucleus dorsalis. And lastly, there is visceral afferent nucleus. So the groups of nuclei in the dorsal or in the dorsal gray column are the posteromarginal nucleus, substantia gelatinosa, nucleus proprius, then the dorsal nucleus or nucleus dorsalis, and the visceral afferent nucleus. Now this substantia gelatinosa, it extends the entire length of the spinal cord. And if you trace this nucleus above, it becomes continuous with the spinal tract of the trigeminal nerve. And this substantia gelatinosa, it conveys pain and temperature sensation. Okay, so substantia gelatinosa is responsible for the pain and temperature sensation. Deep to substantia gelatinosa, there is a large oval nucleus, that is the nucleus proprius. This nucleus proprius, it extends from along the entire length of the spinal cord, and this nucleus receives pain and temperature sensation from the lateral division of the dorsal nerve root and touch and pressure sensation from the medial division of the dorsal nerve root. So this nucleus receives which sensations? This nucleus proprius receives pain and temperature sensations from the lateral division of the dorsal nerve root and touch and pressure sensation from the medial division of the dorsal nerve root. Then next nucleus is the dorsal nucleus. It is also known as Clark's column. It extends from the C8 to L2 or L3 segments. C8 to L2 or L3 spinal segments. It receives proprioceptive sensations, that is the muscle and joint sense, and exteroceptive sensations like touch and pressure from trunk and lower limb. And then the fibers are extended to the posterior spinocerebellar tract. So this dorsal nucleus, it receives proprioceptive sensations from the muscle and joint sense and exteroceptive sensations like touch and pressure from trunk and lower limb. And lastly, this is the visceral afferent nucleus. This visceral afferent nucleus, it extends from T1 to L2 segments and also from S2 to S4 segments. T1 to L2 segments and S2 to S4 segments, and it receives visceral sensations. So sensations from the visceral organs. Then the intermediate gray column. This is the intermediate gray area, and it extends from the T1 to L2 spinal segments, and it consists of two nuclei, the intermediolateral and intermedio-medial nuclei. So this intermediate gray column consists of two nuclei, intermediolateral and intermedio-medial nuclei. And these nuclei act as preganglionic neurons of sympathetic system. So they act as preganglionic neurons of sympathetic system. So there are groups of nuclei in the anterior gray column, in the posterior gray column, and the intermediate gray column. Now recently there is new concept, and according to that new concept, this gray column is divided into lamina. There are around 10 laminae. So this is the laminar arrangement of the gray column. So this gray column is divided into 10 laminae. Now lamina 1 to 6 are confined to the posterior gray column. So lamina 1 to lamina 6. This is lamina 6. They are confined up to the posterior gray column. Now lamina 2. This is the lamina 2. It represents the substantia gelatinosa. Then lamina 3 to 6, they represent the nucleus proprius. The nucleus proprius, it lies between lamina 2 to lamina 6. Lamina 7 represents the intermediate gray column. So this is the intermediate gray column containing intermediolateral and intermedial nuclei. So this is the lamina 7. Then lamina 8 and lamina 9 are present in the anterior gray column. Lamina 8 and lamina 9 present in the anterior gray column. And the lamina 10, it represents the zone which surrounds the central canal. So this zone which surrounds the central canal is the lamina 10. So this is a newer concept of the division of the central gray matter, that is it is divided into 10 laminae. Now outside the central gray matter there is white matter. Now this white matter, this is the white matter, and it consists of nerve fibers or tracts. Now this white matter, it consists of, there are around 5 groups of nerve fibers. Now which are the 5 groups of nerve fibers in the white matter? There are sensory fibers which are coming from the dorsal root of the spinal nerve. Then there are ascending fibers which arise from the tract cells, so ascending fibers. Then there are descending fibers from the cerebral cortex to the spinal cord level. These are the descending fibers. Then there are short intersegmental fibers. And lastly, the motor fiber. These are the motor fibers which emerge from the ventral root. So there are 5 groups of nerve fibers. The sensory fibers which received from the dorsal root. There are ascending fibers, there are descending fibers, then there are short intersegmental fibers, then there are motor fibers which emerge from the ventral root. Now this white matter, as we have seen earlier, it is divided into 3 parts. The anterior white column. Now this anterior white column is also known as anterior funiculus. So this anterior white funiculus, it is present between the anterior median fissure and the anterolateral sulcus. So this is the anterior funiculus. Then there is a posterior funiculus or posterior white column which lies between the posterior median sulcus and posterolateral sulcus. So this is the posterior funiculus. And the lateral funiculus, it is present between the anterolateral and posterolateral sulcus. So this white matter is divided into 3 parts: the anterior funiculus, posterior funiculus, and the lateral funiculus. Now in the white matter, the nerve fibers are arranged in tracts. So there are 2 parts of the tract. There are the ascending tracts and the descending tracts. Ascending tract means from the spinal cord to the cerebral cortex or cerebellum, and descending tracts from the cerebral cortex to the spinal cord level. Now first we'll see the ascending tracts. Now in the anterior funiculus, this is the anterior funiculus. The ascending tracts are, this is the ventral spinothalamic tract. So ventral spinothalamic tract. So first we are going to see the ascending tracts. So in the anterior funiculus, the ascending tracts are ventral spinothalamic tract. Then this is the spinotectal tract. And this is the spino-olivary tract. So there are 3 tracts in the anterior funiculus: the ventral spinothalamic tract, this is the spinotectal tract, and this is the this is the spino-olivary tract. Then in the lateral funiculus, there is lateral spinothalamic. So this tract is the lateral spinothalamic tract. Then this is the ventral spinocerebellar and this is the dorsal spinocerebellar. So in the lateral funiculus there are three tracts: the lateral spinothalamic tract, ventral spinocerebellar tract and the dorsal spinocerebellar tract. And in the posterior funiculus there are two tracts, that is the fasciculus gracilis. Medially there is fasciculus gracilis and laterally fasciculus cuneatus. So there are two tracts, fasciculus gracilis medially and fasciculus cuneatus laterally. So ascending tracts in the white funiculus. In the anterior funiculus, there are three tracts, that is the ventral spinothalamic tract, spinotectal tract and the spino-olivary tract. In the lateral funiculus, this is the lateral spinothalamic tract, this is ventral spinocerebellar tract and this is the lateral this is the dorsal spinocerebellar tract. And in the posterior funiculus, medially there is fasciculus gracilis and laterally fasciculus cuneatus. Now the descending tracts on the anterior funiculus, the descending tracts are, this is the ventral corticospinal, then this is the tectospinal, then this tract is the vestibulospinal and lateral to it, this is very short, is the olivospinal. So ventral corticospinal, this is tectospinal, then this is the vestibulospinal and this is the olivospinal. In addition to that, there is medial and lateral reticulospinal tracts. Medial and lateral reticulospinal tract. Now this medial reticulospinal tract consists of both ascending and descending fibers. So medial and lateral reticulospinal tract. Then in the lateral funiculus, there is lateral corticospinal and rubrospinal tract. In the lateral funiculus, lateral corticospinal and rubrospinal tract. So in the anterior funiculus, there is ventral corticospinal, then this is the tectospinal, this is the vestibulospinal and this is the olivospinal, then the medial and lateral reticulospinal tracts. In the lateral funiculus, there is lateral corticospinal tract and the rubrospinal tract. And in the posterior funiculus, sometimes there is septomarginal tract. So this is the septomarginal tract and sometimes fasciculus interfasciculus. So there are two descending tracts in the posterior funiculus. This is the septomarginal tract and the fasciculus interfasciculus. So these are the fibers present in the white funiculus. So there are ascending tracts and there are descending tracts in the white funiculus. Now applied aspect of the spinal cord is a lumbar puncture. The lumbar puncture is done in the spinal cord and the needle is introduced into the subarachnoid space at the level between the L3 and L4 spinal segments. So between L3 and L4, the needle is introduced into the subarachnoid space, and this lumbar puncture is done to give spinal anesthesia or to withdraw the CSF. Another applied aspect is the epidural anesthesia. Similar to lumbar puncture, the needle is introduced into the epidural space. The needle is introduced into the epidural space, and this is to give the epidural anesthesia. Then conus medullaris syndrome. Now here there is a damage to the conus medullaris. So S2, S3 and S4 spinal segments are damaged, and this leads to the anesthesia of the perineum, as well as there is loss of bladder and bowel control. And lastly, the cauda equina syndrome. This is the cauda equina, and if there is a damage to the cauda equina, there will be lower motor neuron type of paralysis. So this is all about the spinal cord. So we have seen the external features of the spinal cord. Then we have seen the internal features of the spinal cord. In the internal feature, there are central canal, then there is gray matter, and surrounding the gray matter, there is white matter. In the white matter, there are nerve fibers. In the gray matter, there are neurons or interneurons. And lastly, the applied aspect. Thank you.